This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you're starting a blog, a store, or need marketing tools, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. These moments are part of football. It's the first time we have lost 2 games in a row in the Champions League. I mean, he's not wrong on all accounts there. It was indeed Juve's first time losing their first 2 matches in the Champions League, and these things absolutely can happen in football, just as you theoretically could go away to newly promoted Monza in their first Serie A season and lose. That can happen. It did happen, and it made it so that Juve officially had more losses than wins on the season. But these new lows for Juve, this rock bottom for Juve, I mean, it has Juventini rightfully shaken and some even outraged. And while all of this is happening, who is culpable? There were questions asked of bringing Allegri back in the first place back in 2021, and now even more questions as to whether he is capable of pulling them out of this mess. Hey, I'm Adrian and welcome to Rabona TV, the #1 football channel that is run by a Canadian Benfica supporter named Adrian. It's a very strict criteria, but that's how we get the accolades, man. So yes, Allegri is the name that has been screamed by Juve supporters as they are absolutely enraged with results, and perhaps rightfully so when you look back to Juve's form towards the end of last season as well. But we're going to try to take a measured look at things. We'll look at the performances this season, how previous managers were treated, if Allegri has been backed in the recruitment department, and reasons as to why he's still hanging on. We'll give you all the information. We want a more nuanced take, and then you can decide. I'll offer my opinion, of course, at the end. Oh, and we'll have a quick check-in on www.benficaisabsolutelymassive.club. Thanks to our sponsors, Squarespace. Big things happening at that website. Look, they aren't perfect comparisons because there are so many things to consider when looking at the 2 coaches that preceded Allegri, or came after Allegri, depending how you want to look at it. Difference in the personnel in Juve's squad, and perhaps even more importantly in some respect, the fact that teams like Napoli and AC Milan hadn't awoken in Serie A yet. And by the way, I know that Napoli has been good for some time now, but they feel different under Spalletti now. But regardless, it's interesting to look back at how these 2 managers did strictly from a performance point of view, or a results point of view, I should say. So Allegri left in 2019, finishing the season 11 points ahead of Napoli, making it as far as the quarterfinals of both the Champions League and the Coppa Italia. Oh, and they won the Supercoppa Italiana, so a Super Cup and a league title. Maurizio Sarri took over for the 2019-20 season and had to contend with Inter's first season under Antonio Conte. By no means were Juventus great under Sarri. They played a lukewarm version of Sarri ball, somewhere in between Allegri's tactics and Sarri's tactics, which made for some tough viewing at times. But hey, they had a Cristiano Ronaldo who scored 37 goals across all competitions, his best season at Juve, as well as Dybala playing pretty well at times under Sarri. Which isn't always a guarantee, is it? I mean, they still managed to win Serie A by a single point. To be fair, they took the foot off the gas once it was clinched, but the decline in Juve's overall squad was quite evident to see, just as it was evident to see that Sarri wasn't a fit for Juve's squad. Why have a manager like him, a manager with such a clear identity, if he doesn't have the midfield or even just the squad to play his brand of football? That will have been the thinking at Juve, I assume, as Sarri was unceremoniously sacked after just a single season with the old lady. And so with the squad in decline, Andrea Pirlo was handed the reins for his first job as a coach. Seriously, he was signed on to look over one of the youth squads, but was bumped up to first team manager almost immediately. Juve put their new manager Pirlo in a tough position. This team wasn't the same one that had their name on the Scudetto prior to the season even starting. Inter were investing heavily under Antonio Conte, a serial winner, and of course, they stormed to the finish line as league champions, while Juve relied upon Napoli's blunder at the end of the season in order to just slip into 4th place and secure Champions League football. Failure to do so would have been fatal for Juventus, given the pandemic and Ronaldo's wages. On top of that, Pirlo can also point to his Coppa Italia victory for Juve as Money in the Bank, alongside that Supercoppa Italiana win over Napoli, and so he ends with UCL football, 2 trophies, and a sacking. Because of this, Juve began looking for yet another manager, the 3rd manager in 3 seasons after the single-season stints from Pirlo and Sarri, who still managed to win things with a declining squad. Instead of taking a step forward, Juve looked to their past and brought back Allegri, a coach who had many frustrated with his ancient negative tactics, but some were optimistic that he was behind much of their success from the previous decade, and maybe they could catch lightning in a bottle. Well, there's a reason why people, always say that you should never return to a club where you had a decent legacy. It's almost impossible to reach the heights you did before. Managers rarely accomplish this, most often just sullying their reputation. One that comes to mind is Jupp Heynckes, who has returned to Bayern a few times and found success almost every time. But Allegri, upon his return, Juve had a horrendous start to the Serie A season, failing to win a single match after 4 games. But they started to find some sustained success around December-January and eventually settled into 4th place for the 2nd consecutive season. No Coppa Italia, no deep run in the Champions League as they were eliminated by Villarreal, soundly defeated 3-0 at home in the second leg after drawing the first leg. Major cracks shown, and a playbook for other teams to replicate, as Juve had won just 3 of their final 8 matches of the season in Serie A. Despite a massive transfer window and a draw that some would see as favorable in the Champions League, Juve are struggling again. More on that in a moment. And those who saw that the draw was favorable clearly haven't seen the website that we have created alongside the sponsor for this video, Squarespace. Because if they had, they would know that Benfica is absolutely massive. Right, unpaid intern Adrian? Yes, that's right. Intern Adrian here, the man behind the very real website, www.benficaisabsolutelymassive.club. I mean, I'm serious. Check for yourself. Go ahead. Lately, our blog has been so amazing. So thank you for all of your support on our amazing blog as we inform the globe about our stunning club. Teams are finding out, just like Juventus, just how massive we are. And for that, we have a special new blog post and an analytics section. Yes, a new section to enjoy that still has all the stats you need to know about Benfica's season. All powered by Squarespace, because Squarespace is the best all-in-one platform to build your own stunning website, just like BenficaIsAbsolutelyMassive.club, making it easy to build a store, build a portfolio to expand your online presence, get access to marketing and SEO tools, create members-only sections for your top supporters, analytics, connect all your socials easily, and so much more. I created events, blog posts, and an analytics section in about 10 minutes. Imagine what you could do with their platform. So guys, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your own incredible site, go to squarespace.com/RabonaTV to save 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, and back to Adrian. We'll keep it quick in this section, as I'm sure you guys are aware that Juve are struggling this season. But for those who want a refresher or who haven't followed the results, result by result, let's do this. Juve opened the season with a strong 3-0 victory over Sassuolo, a goal from Di Maria, a brace from Vlahovic. All is well, right? Well, 2 frustrating matches follow, showing that the opposite could be true. A frustrating 0-0 with Sampdoria, currently the worst team in the league based on the table. However, we didn't know that at the time, or at least we didn't have definitive proof that they would be one of the worst teams in the league. Then a match against Mourinho's Roma, in which they had more attempts than Roma, 14-8, but when you look at the quality of those opportunities, where they were taken from, and how many made it on target, well, Juve weren't exactly lighting up Roma. From 14 attempts, 10 were outside of the box, as Juve accumulated an XG of 0.6 versus Roma's 1.26 from fewer opportunities. That match ended 1-1. They followed that up with a victory against Spezia at home, a mid-table side. And would you believe me if I said that that was the last time they won a match this season? Back on August 31st, 2022. Since then, in the 5 matches they have played, Allegri's side have drawn twice and lost 3 times. As mentioned in the intro, they now have more losses than they do wins on the season, and that's across all competitions. For the first time in their history, they lost 2 matches in a row in the Champions League group stage, putting in a feeble performance at home against Benfica and fighting well while PSG were sleeping in the second half of their 2-1 loss in Paris. Also, for the first time in history, Monza won a match in Serie A, and of course, that came against Juventus in mid-September of 2022. Not something that Juve and Allegri will want to be associated with, even if Allegri was in the stands for that one. He's still culpable. I think what annoys some Juve supporters is the lack of overall accountability that Allegri is taking for some of these results, the lack of emotion, the lack of saying that he got something wrong, etc. When they put in a terrible performance against Salernitana, which, to be fair, they were indeed robbed of turning that result around into a win, but when questioned about the first half, Allegri pulls out one of his classics, saying, quote, "Was it a very bad performance? No. You say so, you see games, but you don't watch them. The old your word against mine situation. And following that, with Juve losing 2-1 at home against Benfica and leaving them pointless in their Champions League group, Allegri had this to say. Quote, I feel part of the solution. I must find a solution. When I returned, I thought it would take time to build. Unfortunately, I didn't think we could lose 2 games in a row. The important thing is to do well and remain in the Champions League. These defeats are annoying, but it's useless to talk too much now. And the reason as to why Allegri feels like he is part of the solution is because of the contract he was handed. A 4-year deal that is finished in June of 2025. More on that in the next section. He will have seen the trajectory that Juventus was on prior to his arrival, finally losing Serie A. I mean, I think everyone at Juve expected that to come to an end at some point, and he will have known that there was a big process ahead of him. He'll point to the fact that Juve are in a rebuilding process or a transitional period, and no doubt he will point to some of the big characters that the dressing room has lost, guys who worked as deputies to the coach to help ensure that high standards are always met, that the ethos of the club is respected, that everyone fights for the badge and is willing to die on the pitch. Guys like Chiellini and Buffon have left. Their place on the pitch doesn't make sense for Juve anymore, of course, but their presence in the locker room, the examples they set, their leadership on the pitch as well, Allegri will point to them as big losses and that there's a lack of leaders in the squad that has seen a lot of turnover. When it comes to the club, it's hard to know exactly how they feel. We know for a fact that Agnelli and Allegri are homies, that they have supported each other greatly, and there are suspicions that Agnelli was the one that really pushed for Allegri to return to Juventus. What the thinking was, I'm not sure, but in his unveiling, second unveiling, Agnelli spoke of how they had to give him the tools to succeed, and invest they did in the season and a bit that Allegri has been with the club. Vlahovic, Zakaria, who left already by the way, Bremer, Di Maria, Chiesa, Kostic, Milik, Pogba, Locatelli, Paredes, etc. They are absolutely players that I am missing. They have certainly given Allegri some tools, so from their perspective, they don't want to pull a Todd Boehly, aka give the manager the PIN number for the company credit card and then sack him shortly after. However, as a result, sour as more fans aim their vitriol at Allegri and see that there are no consequences, then questions begin to be asked more and more of those who are putting people like Allegri in place, who are hiring him. Guys like Cherubini and Arrivabene start to get heat, as does Nedved, and that is when change typically will come. Well, to be honest, you'd like to hope that the board members can analyze the situation and be proactive with their decisions without being forced into one thanks to public perception. But the questions have started to be asked of Juve's board members. Hard-hitting questions asked by who else but 13-year-old kids. The kid said Allegri out, and Arrivabene, the CEO of the club, said something along the lines of, will you pay the one who comes after him? And the reason that Arrivabene has said that is that ending the relationship with a manager doesn't come for free, unless of course that manager resigns. But by all estimates, it would cost Juve between 20 and 30 million euros to relieve Allegri of his duties. For them, after a summer of spending, it doesn't make sense financially to then spend even more money on replacing Allegri, even if they could probably amortize that payment over a few years and it wouldn't be the hardest hit of all time. And I mean, they have echoed this, with Arrivabene saying after the loss to Monza, quote, it would be completely crazy to sack Allegri right now. Allegri has a project here at Juventus to be developed in the next 4 years. We have a long-term project here. I'm involved too, as a CEO. Of course, that stance and the 20 to 30 million will be out the window should Juve fail to make it into the Champions League qualification places, so their performances will no doubt be watched very closely. As of September 20th, Juve have said they don't want to sack Allegri. I think they will be looking to the schedule, looking to the opponents coming around the corner, and see that there is a great opportunity for them to bounce back. Barring AC Milan, Juve has some fixtures where they will go in as the favorite, but all the same, while these matches can help Allegri to lift his esteem at the club, failure to win them will see them out of the Champions League and in a very difficult place in Serie A, and could force the hand of the board to do something they've been trying to avoid regarding their manager. And just as a side note for you to think about, to add to all your considerations here, back in March of 2019, prior to announcing that it would be the final season for Allegri, his results were hurting. At this time, Fabio Paratici had this to say, quote, it's not about a result, but a project. The future of Allegri is certainly not tied to a Champions League game or a Scudetto, but part of a project. So more project talk back then, only for him to leave soon after. We'll see how patient they will be with this project should results not improve drastically, and like I said, their Champions League money is in jeopardy, as that's what ultimately moves the needle in football for the most part. Once the pocket of the owners, we're talking the ones above Agnelli, we're talking John Elkann here, once that starts to take a hit, these words are just words. So when you take the form, you take Allegri's stance on things, and you take the financial situation of relieving him of his contract, what would you do in this position? Here's my take on it. When unveiling Allegri in July of 2021, Andrea Agnelli said, quote, "He embodies our spirit, which is to achieve a victory, even if it's a narrow one." Well, when you're playing on the precipice like that, on that knife edge between victory and a draw or loss, you can just as easily fall on the wrong side of the results. And that seems to be what is happening now at Juve, where they previously would have, a 2-1 or a 1-0 in their favor. The 1-0s are becoming 1-1s, and the 2-1s are falling in favor of their opponents more often than not. And that's not just a matter of speech, by the way. This season, they have quite literally gone in favor of their opponents more often than they have in favor of Juve. In fact, it has stretched back to May of last season. Across all competitions since May 1st, 2022, Juve have won 3 games, lost 6, and drawn 5. From 14 matches, just 3 wins for Mr. Allegri, a win percentage of 21.4% for a club that won 9 consecutive Serie A titles. Look at any stretch under Sarri or Pirlo and you won't find anything as bad as that. The longest Sarri went without a win was 2 matches. Pirlo, he went without a win in 3 matches. Allegri's current run is at 5 without a win. Their Champions League performances have been equally as bad as well, so that can cancel each other out. But Sarri and Pirlo weren't trusted with this project as Allegri has been. As far as being part of the solution rather than the problem, as Allegri has said, I think it's fair to ask whether Juventus has improved or not since he has taken over, or whether they have regressed. In my opinion, and sure, you could tack this down as just a bad run of form, but in my opinion, they look worse than they have under Pirlo and Sarri before him. The vertical organization of the team is otherworldly in a bad way, in that there is too much space to exploit between the midfielders and the back line no matter what formation they play. When they played with a back 3 against Benfica, there was way too much space between the wing backs and the left and right center backs. All of this is obviously down to coaching. And Allegri is a guy who has spoken at length about having balance in a team, and the organization of the midfield and defense is just as unbalanced as the attack. I won't get too into the attack, however, as I'm getting a bit off track here. But back in February of 2022, when Juve were on a hot streak under Allegri and couldn't stop getting positive results, I went on my friend G Just Juve's channel, and he asked me what I thought of Allegri during this great run from Juve.
Is he the man that Juventus had to recall to build the future?
To build towards the future, I don't know if we're talking about the final version of the ultimate Juve. I don't know that he's the guy, but what I do know is he's someone who's already very familiar with the club, and he's someone who had success with the club. So bringing him in at this time, they brought him in when Juve sort of seemed like they lacked an identity. 2 managers, 2 different ideas of football, a lot of turmoil and turnover in the squad. They just needed someone to sort of right the ship, get a cohesive direction going forward, and then you can start to build from there. But I think right now he's the perfect sort of project manager to have for this Juve rebuild, if you want to call it. He's the perfect person that will bring organization and, as you said, balance into the team. Now, is he someone that will, potentially get them to that next step where they can compete with the Bayerns, the Chelseas, the Cities, etc.? It's hard to say. He was at one time, for sure. But do I think that his style of football will be conducive to that compared to the direction that modern football is going, where everything's very fluid in the attack? I don't necessarily think so. And I still feel that way. If Allegri's tactics were getting stale back in 2019, then what would they be considered in 2022? And that's the thing with a rebuild. As the manager who is struggling, you always have that in your back pocket, don't you? See, I told you it was a bigger project than you all thought. I don't know if anyone could do better in this situation. But it's the job of the board to see through that and make a decision. Is there someone out there who really could do a better job than the guy they currently have? Would Mauricio Pochettino be better? Could Thomas Tuchel get the squad to play better? Would Zidane finally say yes to anything but the French national team? It's not likely, but maybe. Do you go for Igor Tudor, who was Pirlo's assistant, has played for the club, and did extremely well with Hellas and now Marseille? When there are big names such as that, I mean, Tudor to a lesser degree, of course, but regardless of how we feel about them, they at least need to be considered and compared to the guy that you currently have. Could they get more out of the squad that is talented, but has lost all mental fortitude? Something tells me one or all of them could. Well, I'm undecided on Pochettino after the tail end of his time with Spurs and the entirety of his time with PSG, but you get my point. Speaking of getting more out of the squad, it's not as if Allegri hasn't been backed. He has been. And anyone who says, the squad's still shit, is being dishonest. Look at Juve's squad and be honest now. Look past your affiliations and your opinions. It's at the minimum a top 3 squad in Serie A, but the tactics, the approach, the man management, all of the things that are integral for a squad to succeed, it just isn't happening for them under Allegri. Whether that's down to him or the players have quit on him, that doesn't matter at this point, because the outcome is the same, and you can't fire an entire squad. In my opinion, this team absolutely should be doing better than they are. And just as I said back in February, Allegri doesn't feel like the coach, at least in my opinion, that can actually elevate them to become a top team in modern football. That's my take on it though. What's yours? Do let me know in the comments. I look forward to hearing all opinions, but I'm especially curious to hear the opinions of those who want Allegri to stay. Regardless, all opinions are welcome. I'm Adrian. This is Rabona TV, and have a great day. Ciao.